Huh. I can make this work. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever bought the Battle Pass before? If you have, what weapon did you choose? Perhaps you took one of the original weapons for their generic but powerful effects, as well as their high crit rate stat. Or maybe you looked at the more recently released set for a more niche weapon. With Fontaine's release back in 4.0, we got a set of 5 new weapons on the Battle Pass, all still having the signature crit rate that we were all used to, but also included a number of effects that were a lot more specific than the previous set. One of these weapons stood out to me though, a weapon called the Talking Stick. Its effect is not like any other weapon in the game and really got my brain working on how to figure out what I could actually do with it. So here are my findings, my musings, and my ideas for what I could come up with. First, the weapon itself. The weapon is a 4-star claymore that gives crit rate as it levels up. Its effect is what is interesting though. If the character using this weapon has pyro applied to them, that's right, you heard that right, the wielder of the weapon increase their attack by a decent percentage. If the user is affected by electro, dendro, hydro, or cryo, they receive a decent percentage of elemental damage. These of course can both be active at the same time. The bonuses are fairly straightforward, but how you get them are extremely unique. Now, you can just use this thing as a normal stat stick, only getting the extra bonuses when you happen to be applied by those elements by enemies or the environment, but we can do better than that. Let's get into how I plan to use this thing before we start testing it out. There are a number of characters that can actually apply elements to their own party members. However, many of them, such as Shincho or Kokomi, can only apply it to themselves, and only briefly at that. Barbara, on the other hand, is a character that is known for getting your own team frozen by applying Hydro to your own team. This works for our purposes quite well given that she is actually a healer. Hydro is good, and everyone gets her for free. But believe it or not, there's someone better still. Firstly is Bennett. His burst applies pyro to allies who stand in it, giving you easy access to self-inflicted pyro to get the first part of the Talking Stick's passive online. For the second half, we use Dori. Now wait, don't click off the video just yet, hear me out. Dori's burst is actually perfect for this weapon. Not only does it heal and give energy to the character that is currently being healed by it, it applies electro to the character as well. This combined with Bennett's burst, we now have easy access to both parts of the passive with additional upside. Bennett's powerful attack buff, plus Dori's energy regeneration and healing. For the purposes of all teams, Bennett will be using a Noblesse Oblige set focusing on energy recharge, as well as an energy recharge weapon to make sure that his burst is always available. Dori will be using something similar, focusing on a mix set that gives energy recharge and health, to also help with her burst and give her a little bit of extra healing. I won't be going into much detail on the specific builds, as the specifics really aren't as important as just making sure that their bursts are available. With the core of the Talking Stick teams explained, we can start deciding on who's going to be using the thing in the first place. First idea we're going to be talking about actually came from my chat during my live stream, when I was first testing these out. By the way, if you're interested in seeing some of this sort of stuff live, you should check out my live streams right here on YouTube, Monday to Friday. Shameless plug out of the way, my chat's idea was actually Sayu. Given that we need to make sure our Talking Stick user is always being affected by certain elements, her skill, which picks up elements that it comes in contact with, sounds pretty appealing actually. The idea for this team is that we use Sayu as something of a proper damage dealer, adding Farazan to the mix for even more Anemo damage. Giving Sayu a basic Anemo DPS set of artifacts, I took to testing it out. Honestly, it's probably not making any waves or changing the meta, but I have a soft spot for Sayu. Sayu teams are fun, and this is no exception. Apply your buffs, and you can actually get some pretty nasty kicks for her skill. As an added bonus, you're also using 3 healers for this setup, so you're going to be pretty much indestructible. This may not be very compelling for the Spiral Abyss, but it is stellar for pretty much everything else. Before going on to the next team though, you may be wondering something seeing this gameplay. wouldn't applying both Electro and Pyro to yourself make you overload and stop Sayu from rolling? Truth be told, I was worried about this too, but after a quick test I actually learned that when you overload yourself, you don't take any damage, nor do you get knocked back. Instead, you apply it in an area around yourself, which acts as a sort of extra damage source. If you're familiar with the Sunfire team that uses Jean and Bennett to create a swirl effect on yourself, it's pretty much the same thing. With that out of the way, this one was actually my first idea for the weapon, and it was Kaveh. Kaveh likes doing bloom stuff, so having a bit of Electro and Pyro in the mix for some Burgeons and Hyper Blooms sounded like a pretty good idea. And I'm definitely not turning my nose up to more damage on my Kaveh. Now Kaveh, unlike Sayu, can actually hold up decently well in the metagame of Genshin since he's Dendro, and interacts in a very favorable way with bloom reactions. Though this does make building him potentially a little bit weird, ultimately I decided to go with a Deepwood set that had a little bit of everything. So we're talking some EM, attack stats, crit stats, and of course Dendro damage. Results were actually favorable, but not groundbreaking. Though both characters so far have proved to be fairly decent, neither really felt like they were going to be the final home for our talking stick. Leading me to the quintessential Claymore character, Diluc. Diluc already has great synergy with a character like Bennett, and the extra overloads caused by Dori ended up not really hurting as much as you might think, since Diluc's burst tends to send enemies flying away anyway. It didn't really change all that much. Not to mention, a little bit of extra energy for Diluc never hurt anybody. I even took the time to test it out and found that replacing Dori with Kazuha didn't really actually change the damage that much. In fact, in most cases, it seemed that Dori enabled Diluc to deal more damage than Kazu's buff, which kinda caught me off guard. This was it. I was sure of it, so I buckled up and headed straight to the Abyss and did a full run, and this is how it went. Ultimately, on floor 12, it performed pretty well, managing the 2-star on my first run through each chamber, with no fear of being not able to clear it. It was really shocking to see that Dori, of all characters, not only be the only character really being fit to fulfill this role, but also thriving in it. She earned her place in this team. Overall, I think this weapon ended up surpassing my expectations a little bit, and ended up feeling pretty good. And assuming that this weapon ends up being similar to the Battle Pass Catalyst, we may even get a new character come out during the Fontaine set of patches that can use it even better. Update. I started working on this video before patch 4.3, and now that Navia is out, You know I had to try this weapon on her before I could say I was really finished working on it, and, well, her damage with this weapon was pretty good. However, it was pretty clear that the damage was lower than a more synergistic 5-star weapon such as the Unforged, or especially her own weapon, Verdict. It did definitely stand out as a 4-star option for her though. To be fair, I didn't spend as much time as I did with the others, as I didn't really plan on including her at first, but I definitely felt it was worth the mention. Is Navia the character that this weapon was made for? Probably not. But she definitely has the right kind of synergy to use it well. With all that though, I think it's about time we wrap things up here. Overall, at worst, the talking stick is a solid weapon with crit rate that opens up a few interesting lines for team building. However, beyond that, it may be outshined by other weapons. So even though it can be a lot of fun in most cases, I think if you had to choose a Battle Pass Claymore, you might get a little bit more use out of Serpent Spine, but this weapon is still nothing to turn your nose up to. For those of you like me who need an extra excuse to put Dori on a team, or just like the idea of a weapon that makes you think, maybe try this thing out if you find yourself ever buying the Battle Pass. Before the final cheers though, I did want to mention that I plan on doing some more playing around with Navia, so you can expect a video on her and how she plays into the state of Geo in the near future. Anyway, that's all from me. Cheers.